going on, everybody? Welcome to a live edition of the only podcast, post game edition. Expected to do a few of these this spring, but that's not happening. Michigan State loses to Middle Tennessee State 90-81 in what was just an unbelievable game. Spartans are out, 15 upsets to 2. Joe, I guess we'll just get into things. Joe, I have to imagine you're not feeling good.
No, it's hard to contextualize or really let it sit in. I was at work watching the game in a conference room, and as things were going downhill, more and more people kind of started noticing that I was in there watching and coming into the conference room, in there with my boss actually, and it was. I didn't even. It was hard to keep it together, which I had to do at work. But at the same time, like I couldn't even really process. Still haven't really processed the game. So I'm clearly handling everything very well. Not in denial or anything at this point.
It was just unbelievable stuff from Middle Tennessee State. That was just one of the most clutch performances from a team that I've ever seen in basketball. Just the shots that they hit, the times that they hit them, the situations that they hit them, just the entire game. And MSU didn't lead at all the entire game. They fall down 15-2 early. Every time they'd get it close, Middle Tennessee would push back and separate themselves again. MSU, I think they took 2 threes back-to-back with a chance to tie and missed. Valentine had a shot late to tie or take the lead and missed. And Middle Tennessee State would just respond every single time. They finished with better than 1.3 points per possession, a 65% effective field goal shooting. MSU didn't play that bad in this game. They weren't great, but they weren't bad, and MTSU was just insane.
Yeah, I mean, the things that stick out to me are, even apart from the shooting, right? Any team can have a hot shooting night, but MTSU out-rebounded MSU. That's one of the reasons why they were so efficient offensively, especially in clutch moments at the end where they were able to kind of come down with rebounds that were confusing. There'd be a Middle Tennessee guy surrounded by 3 or 4 Spartans and was able to come down with the rebound. That was concerning. And then the other piece was that after Middle Tennessee kind of came out and threw their first punch, it seemed like there were a number of really bad mental errors in terms of turnovers that happened. I mean, there was Matt McQuaid stepping out of bounds. There was Bryn Forbes throwing the ball wildly on a fast break out of bounds. There was, Denzel Valentine traveling, stuff. Aaron Harris doing stuff that, he hadn't done since early in the season. And, they ended up with more than 20% turnover rate and gave up 31% of the offensive boards to Middle Tennessee. So,
and that was
it wasn't just the shooting. I mean,
that was at 40% at halftime too. 40-something% MTSU.
Yeah, and the thing I thought Middle Tennessee did quite well was they really mixed up defenses effectively. I thought they did a good job of going 2-3 a little bit and then switching back to man and then pressing. And it seemed like they just, in football, you talk about rock, paper, scissors. And, if you call the right play against another team's play, even if it was a good call on their part, sometimes you just get lucky with the timing of play calling. And I thought that that's very similar to what happened in this basketball game. I thought that Kermit for Middle Tennessee did a great job of varying the defenses and kind of kept MSU on their heels. And then, yeah, like you said, there are some shots that they made that there's really no way of explaining. The one where the guard went baseline and then finished with a English off glass lay in. I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff was you just shake your head and go, well, what can you do at a certain point? So,
Right.
but yeah,
And
I mean, credit them. They obviously had a great game plan. They did a great job coaching, and they defended at least decently, especially near the beginning of the game.
yeah, and reminder, since this is live, feel free to, if you're listening to this live, feel free to ask any comments in the comment section of this kind of back and forth. We did this last year, but it's a little bit after the game, and I'm sure a lot of people don't want to talk about it. But yeah, we're doing this one live, and if you're listening to it later, that's fine too. But just wanted to do this one live if anyone wanted to get some stuff out. Yeah, I mean, Middle Tennessee, they won the game. I don't think MSU lost. I mean, they lost the game, but it wasn't really because of what anything MSU did. It was what MTSU did. And that, I mean, Izzo said afterward is that, the better team won today, and MTSU was the better team. And if Middle Tennessee plays like that, they could go pretty far in this tournament. Just even the shots that they missed would go in and out and bounce around 3 times before they go out. It was just unbelievable stuff. And MSU sloppy at times with the ball, but they still shot better than 50% for the game. Finished with only 14 turnovers compared to Middle Tennessee's 10. But Valentine never really got going. 13 points, 5 for 13 shooting, 6 rebounds, 12 assists. So, I mean, a double-double. That's a good game for a lot of folks, but that's not a good game for Denzel Valentine. Bryn Forbes and Aaron Harris provided nothing in the first half, basically carried the offense with Costello in the second half. But, again, and every time MSU cut it to 3, cut it to 2, Middle Tennessee would come down and hit a tough shot, get fouled, hit a 3. And just a wild performance. Is it now some big picture stuff here? A couple things. Is it the biggest NCAA tournament upset loss ever? Is it the worst loss for MSU ever? How does it compare to things? I guess to start, is it the biggest NCAA tournament loss? Biggest upset ever? Maybe. I will say. Well, I'll say this first. It's the fourth biggest Vegas upset. Norfolk State over Missouri a couple years ago was something like 21 and a half point underdog. Coppin State over South Carolina was something like 18 and a half. And Hampton over Iowa State was 17 and a half. And MSU was about 16 and a half, 17-point favorite. So there's that. When you're looking at the Missouri game, Missouri was a bigger favorite in KenPom than MSU is now. However, I don't know how many of those other teams that were upset were such big favorites to make the Final Four like MSU, to win the championship like MSU, to have a coach like Izzo that everybody expects to win in March. So, I don't know. I can see it both ways. What do you think?
So, Nate Silver, who actually was born in East Lansing, tweeted out that according to 538's database, it's the third largest upset in the round or field of 64 since the field has gotten out to 64 teams. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly in the conversation, right? It's only the 8th 15-2 upset ever. So, that's a
this is
handful, right?
This is an MSU team a lot of people thought was a 1-seed or good enough to be a 1-seed. Now, I would probably say that we thought this MSU team was better than that Missouri team, but I think Middle Tennessee is a better team than what that Norfolk State team is. Let me look up.
Well, so the thing about that Norfolk State team is that they had Kyle O'Quinn, who ended up being an NBA player. I don't think that there's any NBA players on that Middle Tennessee team. Now, in terms of overall team quality, you might be right. And yeah, that was an interesting thing.
Norfolk State was 174 in KenPom. Middle Tennessee is in the 120s. So Middle Tennessee was quite a bit better than Norfolk State.
Right, and that was interesting too. I thought that I mentioned this actually in the midweek podcast, but I thought that it was interesting that MSU kind of got the strongest 15 seed per basically any any analytics system. There was about a 5% chance that MTSU pulled this upset pregame, according to 538 and actually Ken Palm as well.
Ken Palm had it at 8%. They had MSU
Sure.
at 92. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's it hurts. But yeah, it's definitely to answer the original question. Certainly in the conversation for the biggest upset in tournament history.
Yeah, I mean,
Again.
it does. I mean, I don't know if it has that iconic moment like the Hampton picking up the coach after the win over Iowa State. But again, some of these teams, Iowa State, Missouri, South Carolina, these aren't basketball powerhouses. They aren't teams with the track record like MSU, and I think that's where it comes in. That's where it comes in. However, that would also come into play in what the betting line was. I mean, it's not like we knew that going in. So the fact that despite MSU being, people thought they were a 1 seed, people at Izzo, but they still weren't favored by more than a couple other games. So you can make the case. I don't know. I mean, I again, you could say it. I wouldn't say wrong. You could say it's not. I wouldn't say wrong either. So, but it's up there. And one of these days, the 16 will beat a 1. In fact, MSU in 1990 went to overtime with number 16 seed Murray State, which you don't hear brought up very often in terms of closest 16s over 1s.
Right.
So I think we're both in agreement. Kind of, maybe now. So,
it's in the conversation, right?
Yeah. Now, Spartans asks, and this is kind of going into the next thing: is this MSU's version of? Are you cracking one open?
Yeah, I'm on my second beer. I started drinking at the start of the podcast, so I'm going quick.
Is it the Red Dog?
No, what I had in the fridge was all day IPA. So,
Spartans ask, is this MSU's version of Appalachian State? And that's where it kind of, is this the worst loss in MSU basketball history? Izzo says it's his worst. That would probably make sense. The funny thing about the Appalachian State is that same year, or that same fall in 2007, MSU lost to Grand Valley State in basketball, but that was just an exhibition game. But is it MSU's Appalachian State? I mean, maybe, because I think MTSU is a good team. Appalachian State was a good team, and I don't know. Where does this rank for you in terms of MSU losses? Is this the Appalachian State? Is this something that'll get thrown in MSU fans' face forever?
Well, yeah. Well, so the short answer is yes. The long answer is, I think that the more embarrassing loss is actually to Texas Southern last year, in terms of just raw team quality. And so that's interesting in some ways. So, but the reason why the answer is yes is because in college football, the regular season is basically the playoffs in the first place, right? Like U of M eliminated themselves from national title contention with a loss, and that's one of the reasons why it is such a painful upset for them. They were a top 5 team going into that season. So the reason why that this game is actually the true App State analogy is because it eliminated MSU from national title contention in a year in which they definitely had a shot at it, right? I mean, they were 538 projections had them in the top 4 in terms of chances to win the tournament, and was a favorite for a lot of analysts. Dick Vitale picked them. So there was that's the reason, I think, ultimately why it ends up being that analogy. But the other thing is that the disparity between really good teams in FBS versus really good teams in FCS should be larger than the difference between the winner of the Big Ten and the winner of Conference USA, right?
Well, this is one.
So
This is one thing I was going to say. In terms of upsets, I almost feel like it doesn't feel as big because MTSU has a Division I football program that's decent. This isn't like a Norfolk State or a Coppin State where no one knows where it is or you never heard of it before. I mean, we know what Middle Tennessee State is, and now their basketball program isn't as prominent as a football program, but that was part of it to me. Is like it wasn't this team that we never heard of before because you've heard of their football team. So I mean, I don't know, but I mean, it's probably comparable to App State. I think what this game didn't have is maybe that one iconic play like the blocked field goal does. If they had won on a buzzer beater or something, it'd be comparable. But I mean, maybe the up and under layup that was crazy. Yeah.
to me, that's the moment. That's the moment I will remember.
Yeah, I think that's about what it is. That was the one where it's like, well. There were a number of shots where you're just like, well, can't guard that, and then you can do that. And when they got that layup, you're just like, well, that's it. Ain't no stopping that anymore. Now, my world. Well, first off, shout out to the Purdue fans in the comment section who are joining in the Big Ten misery, and someone mentioning that they respect the Only Colors community for the way they're reacting and the calm and collected reactions. And so that's a shout out to you guys, the listeners, the readers of the site, for being a very respected community. And that's what we've always loved about the Only Colors is that it's not a crazy place where everybody freaks out. I mean, you have the live thread where people react to things live, but once you sit down for a minute, usually are reasonable. So thank you guys for being that, and looks like some Purdue fans respect you for that. Now, my world entire asks, Deyonta Davis, do you think this affects his decision to go pro? Now, MLive got a really good photo of Davis holding his Mike Mulholland. If you want to find my Twitter, it's on my Twitter too. Has a good picture of Davis holding up his jersey and looking at it and looking at the last name. And Mike said to me, I tweeted it, and then Mike said to me, he took it off, laid it nicely on the floor and stared at it, then picked it up and stared at it longer. Davis did not play the last 5-10 minutes. He was benched for Colby Wallenman, basically because of defense, because Izzo needed someone to play defense. And Wallenman stayed in there all the way down the stretch. Now, Wallenman's a senior, Davis is a freshman, but Wallenman's about to be a doctor, and Davis is going to play in the NBA. So I don't know what's going through his head, and I mean, you don't either, but I mean, do you think this could possibly affect his decision to go pro? He's projected as a lottery pick. Maybe he decided he already wanted to go. Maybe he's still on the fence. But if this is how it ends at MSU for him, it's not the best way to go out.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, to me, that question of does it affect his decision to go pro is probably not. I don't think that if he, at least, I guess if I was in his shoes, it wouldn't affect my decision, right? I would think that if you were going to be a lottery pick, you would go, right? I mean, that seems pretty cut and dry. All you can do is hurt your draft stock by coming back, and I think that that's pretty clear. Now, there's positives and negatives to the loss, right? And I think that's probably why the question gets asked. So, yeah, is he upset and wants to, win a national title or at least make a Final Four? I'm sure that that's the case, but ultimately, if I was Deyonta Davis, I wouldn't let it affect my decision. It would probably be hard to do so, but yeah.
I don't know what his decision is. In a vacuum, if I'm a lottery pick, I go. I mean, he's got a lot to work on. We know that. But you can learn while you're getting paid millions of dollars as well. So I don't know what, a lot of things go into it. That's just my personal thing. In a vacuum, you don't know what situations kids have going on. Who knows? But that's just my thoughts. And the thing was, he these last few games, Big Ten tournament, and then the first half of this game were maybe the best he'd ever played at MSU. He really turned into a confident player down the stretch, especially on the offensive end. You know, taking shots on his own, not just putbacks, knowing where to position himself. He had a really nice touch pass on a Costello dunk early, but then he was slow to rotate on the Middle Tennessee bigs who could shoot threes, and that's why he got pulled, because he gave up a couple of threes and because he was slow to rotate, and if you don't play defense, you're not going to play for Izzo. And
right, but let's talk about that for a second, right? Let's unpack that one a little bit more, because to me it seemed like the entire team was really a little shell-shocked at the beginning of the game. I mean, I actually wasn't able to tune in until the under-16 timeout, but when they started playing again, they were not composed. And to me, part of that is that it's coming from the top down, right? And you could see that in the substitution patterns. Izzo was desperately rotating players in to try to find some guys that he was comfortable with defending, and
this was
doing.
This is what happened against Iowa. This is what we talked about against Iowa.
Exactly.
They played, I think, 11 or 12 guys in the first half because Izzo was looking for anybody who was going to play defense. And that's why you had a long stretch there with Ellis on the floor, McQuaid, Schilling, a lot of
Javon Best played significant time, like really important.
This might have been the most minutes in a big game he's had in a long time. Izzo
right, so
you think was he trying to make he was looking for guys who would play defense, and he pulled everybody. And by the second half, Izzo had clearly gotten tired of what Davis was producing on defense, and he went with the former walk-on with no professional basketball future. But
let's talk about. I mean, that's the irony here is that you've got Tom Izzo, master of March, awesome game coach, who basically breaks down and panics and plays 11 different guys. Right? I mean, it was totally unnecessary. And then at times you had on the court, you had Javon Best with Alvin Ellis, with Matt McQuaid, with Denzel Valentine, right? And then maybe Gavin Schilling. Like, there were a number of lineups out there that I thought were really odd lineups where guys probably hadn't played very much together. And I mean, I thought that had something to do with the defensive breakdowns that were involved with Middle Tennessee scoring 1.32 points per possession.
Now you didn't see. You said you didn't see the beginning of the game.
The first 5 minutes I missed.
Right. Well, and Middle Tennessee jumped out to a 15-2 lead like in a snap. They started 6 for 6 on the floor, and like that. So I understood if Izzo thought he needed to wake his guys up and make some big changes, because that was an absolutely atrocious start that they never recovered from. It was remarkable. They were very sloppy on defense, rotating, and Middle Tennessee, like I said, 6 for 6. And yeah, he was making changes. Now, we criticized Izzo in those Iowa games for how many guys he played. And something I noticed that the Middle Tennessee State coach did that I personally love. After MSU would get like a big play that felt like it could turn some momentum or something, he called timeout. There was a 3-pointer by somebody, like the first big bucket MSU had, timeout. There was one in the second half when MSU maybe started to get some momentum, timeout. Izzo has never done that, and it's some fans have been upset about that. He wants his guys to play through things. Now, that's the complete opposite of playing 12 guys in a first half, because you're not letting them work it out. So, I mean, Izzo knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing in the NCAA tournament. I don't know if he did his best job here, but at the same time, he was looking for anybody to get a stop on Middle Tennessee, and nobody did. And I don't know if anybody in the country could, based on what they did throughout the whole game. But maybe Izzo did panic a little bit too. But it was clear that the players were not ready to go. They were not focused, and right off the bat, and they never recovered from it.
Yeah, but again, I mean, I'm still gonna, and I will preface this by saying that anytime I criticize Izzo, I'm being an idiot because he knows just so much more about what's going on than I do. But from my perspective, it absolutely seems like they should have stuck with Deyonta Davis for a longer period of the game, and they shouldn't have. I mean, Javon Bess getting into the game when he did, I think that had a little bit to do with some of the rebounding issues at times as well. If you're going a little bit smaller,
Well, that's the other thing.
rebounding can become a problem. So in general, I just thought that they played too many guys, and I don't understand why, even when you get down 15-2, right? 15-2 against a team that you should beat 95% of the time is not such a big deficit at the 5 minutes into the game that you need to panic. And you saw at various times, as you get within 1 point, even though Middle Tennessee played the game of their lives anyways. So to me, it just seemed like they needed to kind of calm down and just play their normal lineups. It was kind of strange. Didn't see Marvin Clark at all in the second half, and I'm probably the wrong person to.
4 minutes, 3 points, no rebounds. All he did was hit a three, and that's it.
Sure, but
and I don't know. This wasn't the lineup that had went on the run late in the season. It wasn't the straight lineup they used up until the Purdue game when there was 3 games in 3 days, so that made a little more sense. But yeah, I mean, Izzo probably panicked a bit. But then again, the Iowa games, the lead slowly grew throughout the first half. This was a punch in the face right off the bat. And
right.
Izzo tried to change things. And I mean, like I said, the changing, they got to within, 3 points, 2 points a couple of times. Couldn't finish. I mean, clutch play after clutch play by Middle Tennessee. It was just remarkable. And I mean, if Deyonta Davis is in there, does maybe he get that rebound that Wallenman misses on the 3-pointer? That was they got 2 or 3 big offensive rebounds late where Davis was not on the floor, where maybe you could have used a guy like that. But then again, one thing that will piss us off more than anything else is if his big men allow a big man to shoot a 3. And Reggie Upshaw was doing that, and MSU was not answering it. And so he went with the doctor, and season kind of ends with Colby Wallenman getting the big minutes over Davis. So is it the end for Deyonta Davis? I don't know. There's a lot of really good players coming in next year. Davis would certainly be a starter and have a good chance to play, but if you're basically guaranteed millions of dollars, it's very hard to pass that up. And it would be an interesting legacy. A guy who has a world of potential, but didn't even barely scratch the surface of it at MSU. I've said before that it takes 2 or 3 years to really feel comfortable in Izzo's offense for big men. It's just kind of how it always is. Payne blossomed late, Costello late, Nix late. That's just kind of how it always is with the big guys. And so Deyonta Davis could go to the NBA, grow there as a player, become a great player, and his MSU legacy will be he started probably about half the games and they lost in the first round, and that's it. But when you recruit the top players, when you get the top players, that's kind of what happens. So
yeah, Deyonta Davis to me, I mean, if he bolts after 1 year, he'll just be another guy who was, depending on his pro career, kind of like a Zach Randolph, right?
Well, that's what I was thinking. Zach Randolph is probably the comparison, but Zach Randolph was good at MSU, and he helped lead the team to a Final Four. And Davis obviously doesn't have anything
right.
like that.
That's very true. Well, and the other thing is, Deyonta Davis could be a very useful player on that team next year. And maybe that should be our next topic is where the
let's talk about next year at the end.
Sure.
Spartans also asks, what's your advice for facing the world on Monday? Coworkers will be relentless. Shame feels inevitable. It started already on Twitter. And the only thing I would say to any fans, this goes for any fans of any team that loses a bad game, an embarrassing game, is you just sit there and you take it. Pointing you sometimes, especially with social media nowadays, so many people are just fight back at everything, and there's a lot of maybe Michigan fans laughing about MSU losing, but like, you lost to a 15th seed. That's what you do. Sometimes you just gotta take the L. Fighting back and making excuses, pointing at something else, you usually just come off looking worse. You just take it. My advice for any MSU fans about facing their coworkers on Monday is just bow your head in shame and take it. That's all you can do. I don't know. Joe, I know sometimes you get very frustrated in these situations. What do you think?
So I came home from work and Blake O'Neill is sitting in my living room.
This is perfect. This is the perfect scenario.
So who also has been tweeting a little bit. So there's a couple things. One is, like, if there's one person who deserves to have some fun on Twitter after the barrage of horribleness that he has received, it is Blake. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that he was in good humor about it. He actually said that he felt bad for me and said that he meant it. Offered me a hug. I wasn't sure if he was serious about that part or not. But so I mean, yeah, the point there is just, like, there have been a very large number of fantastic MSU sports moments over the last 10 years, right? 5 years even. There's going to be a couple pretty bad ones in there as well. And, yeah, like you're saying, kind of take it on the chin, make a joke at your own expense, something self-deprecating. And that's sort of the best way to diffuse any of that, is if you can be a little self-deprecating about it,
right?
Then it's pretty hard. If you're a Michigan fan looking to give somebody just a hard time about this particular game, like, if they're self-deprecating about the situation, like, it immediately becomes an asshole move to continue to give that person a hard time, right?
And
so that's the way to go about it.
Right. Like I said, sometimes you just gotta take the L. You gotta take the Sparty nose. You gotta take the crying Jordan memes. There
were some pretty good crying Jordan memes, by the way.
There was one that was like a superimposed. It was like Izzo's face, but like black, like Jordan, and it was remarkable. It was kind of freaky, but it was very. I saw
some the blue eyes. I think I saw that too.
Yeah, that was a scary one. But yeah, I mean, like you said, you just got to take it, and I think speaking of the Purdue fans on here, I think one reason MSU fans maybe can take it or should take it is because, like you said, they've had plenty of high moments. I feel terrible for the Purdue fans who get these gut-punching losses and never, get the payoff down the road. They never get that huge win, that championship to kind of make it all. It's kind of like MSU it's the MSU lows without the highs. And so I feel bad for you Purdue fans who are here. I can understand it's a lot. I'm sure it's a lot harder for them to take than MSU fans to take.
Well, and let's talk about the fact that on the internet, at least, and we've talked about this before, on the internet, at least, especially in basketball, I feel like there's a little bit of a Purdue MSU fan base rivalry after the Brandon Dawson stuff and the Gary Harris stuff and the Caleb Swanigan stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm going to reiterate your shout out to Purdue fans, because there's been a lot of vitriol on the internet between the respective fan bases, and for them to be as understanding and commiserating as they've been is a credit to them. So they know how to suffer, I guess, is one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, if you hear a whining dog in here, sorry for that. He just whines.
I mean, I think that dog is just vocalizing how we all feel right now.
So let's talk legacy now. So we talked about during the week. I said MSU teams are judged and remembered on if they make the Final Four or they don't. Red Wing teams are remembered based on if they won the Stanley Cup or they didn't. This MSU team did not reach the Final Four, did not win the championship. They didn't even come close. The only thing I could compare this to in recent MSU history in terms of basketball teams is 2006 when they lost to George Mason, who ended up going on to the Final Four. That was a team with guys like Shannon Brown and Paul Davis. That was a senior class that had reached the Final Four the year before, surprised people and reached the Final Four, and then never really didn't reach the potential in 2006, got knocked out. That's kind of what this one reminds me a lot of. That team, but this team is a 2 seed. This team had the Player of the Year. How do you remember this team? To me, it ends up as, this loss is a stain on the legacies of the seniors because it's how they go out. And this team is remembered alongside probably that 2016, but even more so in terms of what went wrong. What do you think?
So it's interesting that you bring up the 2005-2006 cadence because I think that it really matters how Middle Tennessee State does in the tournament going forward. If they, part of 2006 and one of the reasons why 2006 isn't as painful as it could be is because George Mason made that run. So when you look back, you're like,
yeah, sorry. And a lot of people don't remember they beat MSU in that first game. Everybody remembers the UConn game that sent them to the Final Four, but they beat Michigan State and North Carolina to even get into the Sweet 16.
Right. So that's my thing about Middle Tennessee State. If they make a run, even if they only beat Syracuse, who is a 10 seed, right? If they beat Syracuse and make the Sweet 16, then it's like, oh, well, okay, that was just a team that was hitting its stride at the right time. They were a pretty good team. There's no shame in the upset. But if they lose in the next round, then it's one of the only 15-2 upsets ever. And it becomes much worse. And the other piece of that, too, I think that you kind of left out of the analogy, but completes it to some degree is I think in 2005, it was a little bit of a surprise Final Four team. I don't think that team was supposed to make it. And then in 2014, 2015, that was a surprise Final Four season as well. So that's one thing that actually makes me feel a lot better about this loss is that Denzel Valentine and Bryn Forbes and Matt Costello and Colby Wallenman got to go to a Final Four last season, right? So that helps.
It's not Keith Appling and Adrian Pan. When they lost to UConn, like that, it wasn't, they lost, their careers over. It's they never got to go to a Final Four. And like that's how MSU players are remembered. That's how MSU teams are remembered. That's why I said that.
So in terms of legacy, right? It's going to be one of the most upsetting losses as an MSU fan in any memory. But in terms of what that meant for the senior class and what and their legacy specifically, I don't know. It sucks. It tarnishes it to some degree, but ultimately, I think they'll be better remembered for the Final Four that they went to. Much like the 2005 team.
Yeah, I don't know. When I think of the last year's 2015 Final Four team, dude, stop crying. I don't know why you're crying so much. I think of Travis Trice. That's the first thing I think of, first player I think of, and then maybe Brandon Dawson, and then probably Denzel Valentine. I do think part of Draymond Green's legacy is that Sweet 16 loss to Louisville and kind of how his career ended. He got Final Fours as a freshman and sophomore, but when he was the guy, they never got there. Now I think Valentine had a bigger role probably last year than maybe Draymond did early in his career, but that's part of it.
Absolutely. And
I think this team is going to be remembered for the way it lost. It's not going to be remembered. let's just look at some recent teams. 2009. I mean, I think the 2008 team is partly remembered for how they lost against Memphis, the blowout loss. I mean, 2009, they're remembered for reaching the championship game. 2010, remembered for reaching the Final Four. 2011 is remembered for how bad they were. 2012 is remembered I think it's partly how they surprised people and became a 1 seed when no one expected them to. I think it's generally a positive thing about the 2012 team. 2013 team is I don't know. Nothing really sticks out to me about that one. Last year's team is remembered for the injuries and falling up short and losing the final four streak. Last year's team is remembered for reaching the Final Four, and this year's team will be remembered for losing to Middle Tennessee.
So the 2013 team, I think you're shortchanging. The reason, what I remember specifically from the 2013 team was the blowout win against number 2 Michigan at the Breslin.
Yeah.
And just the thing about that, I will never forget the 2012-13 year in the Big Ten because there were just so many really absurdly good teams in the Big Ten that year. There was the Indiana team with Zeller and Oladipo. There was the Michigan team with Burke and Stauskas. And then MSU was right there. And in fact, maybe even the best team with Nix, Payne, Appling, Harris, and Dawson. But, there were a couple games that didn't go quite as well as they could have. And then they got a bad draw in the tournament and had to play Duke in the first game of the second weekend. So that was what I'll remember of that 2013 year. But
I for some reason not much of that year stuck out to me. Other than I guess the Michigan game, but also Seth Curry going off and MSU
right
to buy a bucket. But yeah, I mean, and I think we can end that argument about Forbes being the best shooter in MSU history. He did have a good second half, but he did not finish his career great in the postseason.
Well, can we talk about the irony of Steve Smith calling the game?
Yeah,
for a second. That was really striking, and you could kind of tell that his demeanor at the very end when they were talking about late game situations, you could tell that he was kind of bummed. There was no. He's a generally upbeat guy, and he was not feeling it. He was pretty upset, and that was kind of an interesting dynamic to watch at the end of the game, actually.
Yeah. It was just shocking in what Middle Tennessee was doing. It was just it's hard to describe it. I just keep saying unbelievable stuff.
Quite literally unbelievable, right? I mean,
the shots that they made, the Giddy Potts couldn't miss, the long twos they're making, the threes, the big men hitting the threes, the buckets they were getting when they were getting fouled. How about this? I was wondering with 3 minutes left if they would start fouling because Middle Tennessee's not a good free throw shooting team at all, and MSU just couldn't get a stop at all. Obviously, hindsight, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But say Middle Tennessee, was 1 for 2, a point per possession. That's less than the 1.3 that they had for the game. Did you think about that at all? About if they should start fouling sooner because they just were not getting the stops? I'm not surprised Izzo didn't do it because of for one, his pride, and 2, you kind of you had to figure at some point they were going to stop making these unbelievable shots, but they never did.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think with 3 minutes left, the game situation never really dictated it. It wasn't more than a 2-possession game, really, at any point until less than a minute left. And then at that point, they did start fouling. But no, I didn't think that they should have started fouling earlier. I know that Middle Tennessee is not a great free throw shooting team, but I think that the biggest mistake was just the number of times that an and one occurred. How many and ones? Have you seen any game ever before where there were the number of and ones that happened in this game? That was an incredible, and I don't know if it was, I think it was some combination of slightly weak foul calls and then also just bad defense. Ultimately, guys who got lost or didn't fight hard enough through a screen and then were trying to recover and were too physical in their recovery. So that was pretty striking in the second half, especially just the number of fouls that happened, even when the even when baskets were made.
Yeah, I
You'd
mean,
hope that
it wasn't like
guys
a
would
slight.
foul harder.
Right. Well, I mean, they kind of did. I mean, they generally weren't ticky tack guy gets the layup. It was guys falling back and banks it in, and or there was the one late on the dunk, and there was actually one late on a dunk where the guy missed it where he got fouled, which surprised me. I was like, whoa, they actually didn't get an and one there. But yeah, I mean that's just part of making the plays. They either made the tough shots, or if they got fouled, they still made the shots and added the free throw onto it. It was, I mean, when we talked about what needed to happen for MSU to lose, we said Middle Tennessee needed to get hot shooting, and they did, absolutely. And MSU probably need to get cold, and probably struggle on the rebound, because there were two things that Middle Tennessee does really good coming into this game, and that is make threes and prevent offensive rebounds. They did both. MSU did. They shot out of their minds, and MSU finished with, what was MSU's offensive rebound rate? They grabbed 8 offensive rebounds with 18 misses. So
it was about 30%. I mean, they did a decent job on the offensive glass. They just did a poor job on the defensive glass.
On the defensive glass, right?
Yeah.
Middle Tennessee grabbed almost a third, 10 out of 32. And some of those were late. They were big. There was the one where the one guy grabbed the rebound over 3 MSU players, and I think put it back up and got fouled. There was the late one, that where the 3-pointer was way short and went off in the corner. That was kind of unlucky. I mean, if we're being honest, MSU did get quite unlucky in this game because of the amazing things that MTSU did, and that rebound was an example. But they didn't rebound the way that they should have to begin with.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there was some element of luck that kind of went against MSU in some ways, where the shots that were just kind of thrown at the rim caromed in just the right way a couple different times. But at the same time, there were times when MSU just didn't body up on somebody and gave up some putbacks. And it's really hard to get to 1.3 points per possession, and a number of things have to go in the direction of a team to get there. And they got hot from 3, which is a big part of it. They got offensive rebounds, and statistically speaking, possessions where offensive rebounds occur tend to be higher in terms of points, because when you get an offensive rebound, generally it's in a decent position to score. So that's another piece of it. And then they also got to the line a lot. Even though they didn't have a great free throw percentage, they hit a lot of really clutch free throws at the end, especially Giddy Potts getting to the line and going 4 for 4 at one point. Had they not shot free throws quite as well, that could have been a big difference. Now, I'll also say that Matt Costello missed the front end of a 1-and-1 at a really important point in the game.
Yep.
And that was painful. With 6 minutes left, Colby Wallenman, Wallenman.
Schilling missed a pair.
Schilling missed a pair.
He missed one earlier.
Those points were really important, and I think
these teams
logically, had there been a point at which MSU took a lead, things, MSU might have loosened up a little bit and just not been quite as tight. But
these teams hit the same amount of 3-pointers. They both hit 11, but Middle Tennessee made 3 more free throws and 3 more buckets, 3 more 2-pointers, and that's your 9 points. They just made them. They just made them at all the right times. Every single time they needed the bucket, they got it. And MSU would come down, and Valentine would travel, or Harris would travel, or Valentine would turn it over, and they just net one. When it came down to MSU, could have won this game. As good as Middle Tennessee played, they were still in a good position. They could have pulled it off, but in the final 4 or 5 minutes, Middle Tennessee just made every clutch play, and MSU made missed just about everyone. They'd respond with a 3 to keep it close again, but they never made the clutch play to get over that hump. They didn't lead the whole game.
Yeah, and that's why I'm on my third beer of the podcast already.
Yeah, I figure we can wrap up here. I mean, Izzo was crying in the post game press conference, and you don't see that from him. This one obviously took a lot out of him.
I think that he just really liked this team.
He did.
Also,
he said
he
said this team resurrected him. It made him kind of love coaching again, and why it kind of remind him why he does it, and he's gonna get this. He said this team gave him more years of coaching, which I think is good for MSU fans. And I think he also said, you take solace in the fact that Middle Tennessee just beat you. It wasn't those 2012 and 2013 exits. MSU went just absolutely ice cold. In this situation, it was just they just made the plays. I mean, MSU, a lot of those shots, MSU actually played decent defense. They just went nuts and made the shots and beat you, and that's what you got to do to pull off an upset like this. So before we look on to, we'll finish it up with next year and what's coming. But anything else you want to say about the 15 Middle Tennessee over number 2 seed Michigan State? Any other thoughts on this game or anything else you wanted to say about it?
No, I think I said everything I could and then some. So it just hurts. It just hurts so much.
It's just like surprising. I mean, what are you gonna do? Some of those shots. Well, just like, what are you gonna do?
Here's the other thing. Like the game. I'm trying to think of the games in which I have been the most upset.
Oh, let's say this.
Yeah.
I think this is what you're going to say, but this is what I forgot to ask. In your lifetime, where does this rank for heartbreaking losses? Is it how does it compare to the title game loss to North Carolina or the football loss to Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game or something like that? For you, I know you're a little bit younger than me, but where does it rank for you? Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah. So the 2011 Big Ten championship game to me is still number 1 for a couple different reasons. And yeah, a couple personal reasons, but that to me is still right there because of the way that it happened too. So, you talk about perhaps the lack of iconic moment in this upset. There were a couple of iconic moments in that 2011 Big Ten championship game. That to me is still number 1. And the other thing is, this MSU team went to a Final Four a year ago. They've been to a number of Final Fours since I've been a student. So it's number 2, I would say. I was actually immediately after the game more upset when MSU lost to Ohio State in 2014 in football. That game, I think, gets underrated in terms of disappointment because MSU was maybe not quite a touchdown favorite in that game. Undefeated. It was at home.
Well, not undefeated. They
had lost to Virginia Tech.
MSU had lost to Oregon. But
oh, you're right.
They were in position in the Big Ten. They were that's kind of like this game, this Middle Tennessee game, in the sense that JT Barrett just made some unbelievable throws in that game, and MSU was always an arm's length away and could never get over the hump, kind of like this game.
Yeah, you're right. But anyways, that is maybe the most disappointed I've ever been after a game. There are a couple other ones that are a little underrated. I thought the loss in 2012 to Nebraska at home was one of the most upsetting games I've ever watched. Partially because MSU had a chance to win the division at that time that year, despite the fact that they hadn't had a great year up until that point. I will also throw in 12-13, the 1-point loss to Michigan, where Keith Appling had his pocket picked by Trey Burke. And yeah, I mean, it's right up there. I would say that this is probably number 2, though.
We've talked about that 2011 game, football game before, and I made the point that I think MSU, at least some MSU fans that I know, looking back now, it doesn't hurt as much because of going to the Rose Bowl 2 years later. I mean, at the time, yeah, you thought maybe that's the last best chance they'll have at a Rose Bowl, but looking back now, maybe it changes, and kind of how you're saying this basketball team making the Final Four last year makes this one not as bad because they did get the Final Four. I think the fact that, like I said, they made the Rose Bowl kind of makes up for, even though, I mean, that was Kirk Cousins' last game. Or almost his last game. He never got to win. He never got to go to the Rose Bowl, which was his thing. And Valentine got a Final Four, but he never got to the championship game. And that open plaque on the Breslin locker room floor that says "reserved for a future champion" is still reserved. Izzo said he thought this team had the possibility to win it all. He thought 2014 had the possibility to win it all, and they were 8 minutes away from a Final Four there. He thought 2010 had a chance to win it all because of who was there in the Final Four with Butler, Duke, and West Virginia. But this team, a top reached number 1. They won the Big Ten tournament. They had the Player of the Year. They had everything set up to make that run, and it doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. And now we look toward next year, where Valentine's gone, Forbes is gone, Costello's gone, and Wallerman's gone, and that's a hell of a lot of production gone. But what they have coming in is a top 5 recruiting class with 5-star wing player Miles Bridges, 5-star shooting guard Josh Langford, 4-star point guard Cassius Winston, 4-star power forward Nick Ward. A very, very good class coming in. Still the possibility of adding number 1 overall player Joshua Jackson, who I think is down to MSU in Arizona. So this is going to be a very different MSU team next year. And what does your outlook look like right now?
Yeah, well, that's the most amazing part of this season to some degree is preseason. My column that for the Only Colors that I wrote was saying that this season was like playing with house money because they came off of a Final Four year. It's a year before arguably the best class that Izzo has ever brought in as freshmen. So it's interesting how expectations change over the course of a season, right? You know, if you had told me before this year started that MSU would go 13-5 in the Big Ten and lose in the first round, get upset in the first round, I wouldn't be happy about it, but I wouldn't have been, apoplectic like I am now. So that's interesting in general. But next year, I think, really has the chance to be an exciting team for any number of reasons. I think that Tom Izzo hasn't had a team that will have to be as young as that one ever, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the guys who are going to end up starting, and even considering Deyonta Davis, right? If Deyonta Davis sticks around, then he will be a sophomore and sort of be an elder statesman in some ways, which is kind of interesting. So that's the raw talent is going to be incredible, and I think that's something that gets lost about this particular team, the 15-16 MSU basketball team, is that they were a group of overachievers, right? Of guys who were obviously talented, right? They absolutely deserve to be in the upper echelon of college basketball, but from a raw talent standpoint, we're kind of playing above their weight to some degree.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this current team in that, how talented are they? Yeah, Valentine's Player of the Year. Forbes is an amazing shooter. Costello is a Mr. Basketball, but how do they compare to maybe the talent of a Kentucky? How many NBA guys are on the team? Maybe 1.5, 1 and 2 halves. But it was, as a team, they were without a doubt one of the best teams in college basketball, and obviously greater than the sum of their parts. Now, next year's team, and also we talked about from the beginning of the year how deep this team was going to be, and that was going to be a huge advantage. So I think we knew good things were possible because of just how many players that they had and how many guys that they would have to use. Now, some guys maybe didn't live up to that. Javon Best was starting at the beginning of the year, but other guys stepped in. People thought Aaron Harris was going to replace Forbes in the starting lineup and be the point guard, and things didn't turn out how we expected. But the sum was absolutely greater than the parts. Next year, I think the parts are going to be greater than this year's parts. The question is how well can they come together? Because, like I said, Izzo has maybe never had to deal with a team this young and talented since maybe 2001, maybe, when they lost after all the championship guys. But they had some sophomores on there. I mean, this team is going to rely a lot, I think, on these freshmen, especially if they get a guy like Joshua Jackson. I mean, you're looking at a situation like the Fab Five Michigan teams where you're going to have freshmen really all over the starting lineup.
Right. I mean, that particular contingency would be very interesting if Deyonta Davis goes pro and Josh Jackson comes to MSU. I don't know that there would be a non-freshman starting, right? I think that you'd probably have 5 starting freshmen. What player on this roster do you think would start over any of those 5 guys, other than Deyonta Davis?
I think Aaron Harris could start because of his experience.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Deyonta Davis could start, but other than that, there is. I'm going to go down some guys here. Kyle Ahrens, no. Javon Best, no. Alvin Ellis, probably not. Tum Nairn, maybe. That's another one I think is a big maybe. Maybe even more so than Aaron Harris, just from the point guard standpoint and what Izzo wants out of his point guard. I don't totally know how good the relationship is with Winston and how quickly Winston would pick it up. But then Marvin Clark, no. McQuaid, no. Kenny Goins, no. Matt Van Dyke, no. Gavin Schilling, maybe. But again,
depending on Nick Ward, and because Nick Ward is sort of the 5th guy of those 5, and is a terrific prospect, and I expect to be a very good college player, but he isn't quite of the caliber of a Miles Bridges or of a Josh Jackson, where you can kind of assume that you're going to kind of slot him in. So you're right. I mean, I think a starting 5 that included Gavin Schilling and Aaron Harris might be the way to go. It also feels to me like Tom Izzo might have some reservations about starting 5 freshmen.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. MSU teams Izzo teams run so many sets. You have to know the sets. It's a very complicated, detailed offensive system. It's very regimented. Izzo's not the kind of coach who throws his guys out there and say, throw it around, figure out what works best for you. It's a very regimented system, and that's why I'm very curious to see how so many true freshmen in your rotation is going to work out, because there's going to be freshman mistakes, and is he going to let them work through it? Is he going to pull them for veterans? It's not been Izzo. I mentioned how the big men under Izzo take a long time to develop. Nix was a Mr. Basketball. Costello was a Mr. Basketball. Payne was a 5-star recruit. It's been probably since what? Maybe since what, the 04, 05 team, maybe, when you had some of those top guys like Shannon Brown, who came in, but or back to Zach Randolph, Jason Richardson, that 01 team. It's been a long time since Izzo's had maybe to rely on so many young guys like this. Gary Harris picked it up, but Gary Harris, I think, was a very cerebral player who loved defense and fit great with Izzo. I don't know any of these young men personally. I haven't seen a ton of them play. I know they're obviously very good, but it's going to be a very, very interesting dynamic to see how Izzo handles it, because a lot of top basketball recruits are used to AAU ball, where it runs through them. They do what they want. It's not very regimented, and Izzo's going to have to kind of mold this clay, so to speak, and he's going to have a hell of a lot of clay.
Well, what I'll say about this clay is that I think that the guys who decided to come to MSU understand what MSU basketball is about, right? I mean, I think Miles Bridges, based on what I've seen, is a guy who is absolutely willing to kind of play up in terms of position. He's willing to play power forward, even though he might be a little bit undersized for that position. Cassius Winston seems somewhat similar. Langford seems the same way. Nick Ward seems like he's mostly just a very physical guy with good size. So, I'm encouraged by that. It seems like the right personality grouping.
You're
basketball
gone?
recruiting as closely as some, but at the same time, like based just on the video, the film that I've seen of these guys, they seem like they're gonna be pretty solid from the get-go and unselfish, and they seem to like each other too. That there were those T-shirts that came out that had all five, including Jackson, on them. So it's exciting, right? And it's going to be a fun team to watch, I think.
I mean, if they get Jackson, no one player, that moves everything up another level. Moves everything up a level, no doubt. So something John Calipari doesn't get enough credit for. He brings in all these guys who can go to the NBA after 1 year, but he gets them to play defense, and that cannot be undervalued. He brings in a lot of these guys who are the stars of their teams, who are knowing they're going to be a first-round pick, and he gets them to play defense. And I'm very curious if Izzo will talk to Calipari, would talk to, or has, or would talk to Calipari just about how you deal with so many freshmen, because Calipari, he gets hard on those guys, but he gets them to play defense, and obviously that's going to be the most important thing under Izzo. And Izzo, it's maybe uncharted after his worst loss ever, one of the biggest NCAA tournament upsets ever. He's now heading into uncharted territory. He's going from a team that he loved with a point guard that he's known for more than a decade, and a friendly team that powered by seniors, to a team that's going to be powered by freshmen. And that's going to be a big culture change, I think, for a lot of people involved in the program. It'll be very, very interesting to see where it goes. But that's next year. And right now, MSU is still going to be feeling this loss to Middle Tennessee for a long time, I think. Anything else?
We got one more question.
Oh, did we get an extra question? Oh, we did.
Yeah, just now.
East Lansing asks, where will Denzel Valentine end up in the annals of MSU history? And this is a good question. Do they retire Draymond Green's number? Do they retire Denzel Valentine's number? I don't know. At this rate, I am thinking they will, because of what Draymond's starting to do in the NBA and the money he's giving back to the program. Valentine is hard to say. I think sometimes what guys do in the NBA it can help their standing. What do you think?
So one of the more interesting questions that I heard on a podcast recently was I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast. He had Chuck Klosterman on, and they were talking about the NCAA tournament. One of the questions they had was, if you were to build a 5-man team at various colleges, what team would end up winning a tournament of the 5 best players from a college, over the course of time? And so I started thinking about, what the top 5 MSU guys would be, right? And what's interesting about that grouping is how versatile a lot of those guys are. I mean, you absolutely have to include Magic Johnson, right? I think you absolutely have to include Draymond Green.
Magic, yeah.
Right. So but after Magic, right? I think it kind of becomes a little more gray in some ways. I would include Draymond on the MSU top 5, and I think I'd probably include Denzel Valentine. It's hard to know exactly what he's going to do in the pros. I think that the style of NBA basketball right now benefits Denzel Valentine, where it's a little positionless. Guys who can pass the ball very well and shoot the ball very well tend to do well. And so I think Denzel Valentine's going to have a good NBA career. But if you were building the best 5 from MSU history that you could, I think I would have a very hard time leaving out Denzel Valentine. So I don't know exactly.
Who would your 5 be?
I guess the other 2 would be hard, right? I think I would definitely include Magic, Draymond, and Denzel. And then I might include Sean Respert, just given his shooting ability and the fact that the rest of that team is so versatile, right? You could even have Magic Johnson playing center, probably. And then Draymond Green at the 4.
That's what I was going to ask. It's kind of unsure. I mean,
and maybe Scott Skiles. I think Scott Skiles might be in there as well.
Is Scott Skiles your point guard, or is Mateen Cleaves your point guard? That's where it comes down to. To me, I'd go Mateen at the point, probably. Respert at the shooting guard. Valentine at the 3. Draymond at the 4. Magic at the 5. I guess. I mean, Magic can play. They just got a lot of guys who can handle the ball really well at different positions. I mean, you could put Magic as your center. The Lakers did it. So
if the Lakers can do it, I think the Spartans can do it. So
I think it's fair to say it. But then again, bringing the ball up the court, is that going to be Cleaves or is that going to be Magic? Probably split it, but then it'd certainly be an interesting lineup.
Well, and here's the thing too. Then you've got Respert, Valentine, and Draymond all available to shoot threes. I mean, to me, that's one of the more interesting top 5s, probably, when you talk about various schools and their best 5 in going back in their history. But anyways, my point here is just to the question of where will Denzel Valentine end up in the annals of MSU history. I think he's one of the top 5 guys at this point, right? If I had to pick a 5, he'd be in it, and that kind of says a lot, because there's a lot of guys that were extremely good players that have an argument. Steve Smith, who we talked about earlier, Scott Skiles, who I mentioned in that conversation, Zach Randolph, even though he wasn't necessarily a fantastic college player, he was still a pretty good college player and ended up having a very good NBA career. Mo Pete, right? I mean, these kind of guys are there's a number of them. So yeah, I put Valentine in my top 5 though.
I mean, I put Magic's 1, Mateen's 2. Probably at this point, Draymond is 3, given what he's given back to the school and what he's starting to do in the NBA. And after that, Respert's the leading scorer. Scott Skiles is up there. Jumping Johnny Green probably has to be up there somewhere. Greg Kelser.
Yeah,
Jay Vincent. I think Valentine's in that mix right outside the top 3. I think at this point we can put Draymond at number 3, and then I think Valentine's kind of in that group around number 4 and 5 and 6 and all that.
So one question I think we should save for a off-season podcast, because I think that it's one of the better questions about MSU basketball that is contentious and fun to talk about, is whether or not Kalen Lucas should have his number retired at MSU.
That was something I covered his senior year. That was something people talked about, and I think heat of the moment, a lot of people said yes. I think looking back now, it's a no. Just my take.
Well, I don't want to.
Well, I already blew it, didn't I?
We can chat about this later, but I feel like it's
we can do a whole jersey retirement thing later. We already went deep into your starting 5, so I think we're good to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, it's been like an hour and a half. I'm 3 beers deep, so
yeah. So yeah, I guess to wrap this up again, an historic loss for the Michigan State basketball team that will stick with Izzo for a long time. We'll stick with Denzel Valentine forever, he said, and I'm sure we'll stick with MSU fans for a long time. And moving forward, the baseball team's off to its best start ever. So if you're into college baseball, pay attention to that. Joe's future as the Only Colors managing editor is wrapping up here, but we'll find some reasons to throw some podcasts together. So Joe, I would like to thank you for your work as managing editor. You've done a tremendous job bringing a lot more people into the fold and kind of taking the Only Colors to that next step. I think outside of that core group that founded it, you've done a good job of continuing it and giving me the opportunity to do this podcast. And so thank you for that. And
thanks, Chris.
Best of luck with everything you do going forward. But in the meantime, we'll keep doing these podcasts. So just want to say thanks. And anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's all I got. It's an additional interesting addition to sort of the end of running the Only Colors, which has had a pretty major impact on my life. So,
and thank you to all the listeners and readers who, as the Purdue fans said, make it the most enjoyable place to talk about Michigan State sports. And I think all of you appreciate that, and so we appreciate the civility, and also a congratulations to Joe Rexrode on his new job with the Tennessean. Did a tremendous job covering Michigan State beat for decades, and he will be missed. So a lot of goodbyes here, but as for this next podcast, I'm not sure when it'll be. We'll probably throw some off-season ones together, but thank you guys for listening to this podcast, and we will talk to you guys next time. See ya.
See ya.